We know that schools have been back. I'm absolutely shattered. But I can say that everybody I know who's a teacher or who works in school, we're so pleased to be back in schools and see the children that we work with after so long. It's been absolutely lovely teaching and seeing children and seeing them back in school. However, we are aware that things have been slightly more challenging than they would normally be when we go back in September. We know that there's been massive changes to routines for children, for staff, and parents have got to get used to this as well. And we know that has been really challenging. Hence why I think we're all so tired already 4 weeks in. But we're also aware of obviously rising cases in coronavirus, both nationally and within Tower Hamlets. So we'd like to use this meeting as a chance for parents and carers to find out from parents and carers in Tower Hamlets, what your concerns are, so that we can then take these concerns to the local council and to government, and we can explain and express what these concerns are. So we're going to we would like to hear as many comments from parents and carers as possible, or indeed questions if you have any questions. So throughout the meeting, if you do have a question, if you could raise your blue hand. So you do this by, if you click on participants and go to your name, you can raise your blue hand. Or if you'd like to type a question in the chat when one of our speakers are talking, you can do that. And we will try and read through those chat, and we will try to get some of those questions answered for you. So we have 3 speakers today. We're first of all going to hear from Kevin Courtney, who is the General Secretary for the NEU. And then we will hear from Afsana Begum and Rushnara Ali, who are local MPs. And then after we've heard from the speakers, we will give a chance for you, parents and carers, to either make a comment or to ask any questions to our speakers. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome Kevin Courtney. Welcome to tonight's meeting.
Thank you, Daisy. And like Daisy said, my name is Kevin. I'm the General Secretary, or the Joint General Secretary of the National Education Union. And I'm really pleased to be at this meeting tonight with parents and school staff in Tower Hamlets. Really pleased to be invited by Alex, and really pleased to be here with Daisy and Kiri, with Afsana and with Rushnara. And just want to re-emphasize what Daisy said, that our members, teachers and support staff, are pleased to be back in school in September, pleased to be with the children again after that great period of lockdown. And as well as being pleased to be back, doing everything we can to try and keep our schools safe and keep our communities safe. And I mean, we think there is more to be done on that, and we think there is more that government needs to do on that. We're seeing in recent days that cases are going up. I don't know what the figure was today, but 7,000 new cases yesterday. And that's a scary thing, because if that carries on happening, and if cases go up and up, then we're going to get back to where we were in March with the number of people dying and with the need for another lockdown. So we want to do everything we can to avoid that, to stop cases going up, to get cases going down again, in order that children can stay in school and in order that we can all stay safe. And in some cases, that will mean local restrictions, which feel difficult for us, but which we think we have to go through together in order to keep cases down. In other cases, it means the government doing more than it's doing at the moment. And I just want to, Daisy said that teachers are tired at the moment. I think that applies to teachers. I think it applies to head teachers and support staff. It is more tiring than any other year that they've been through. They are trying to educate children in school, as well as children who are out of school. They're trying to make sure that children follow all of the COVID security measures, trying to do that themselves, and it is exhausting in that. And what we're finding across London, and I've heard of cases in Tower Hamlets already, where under Public Health England advice, so it's not decisions by the schools, but under Public Health England advice, they've had positive cases in classes and they've had to send home whole year groups. And in some cases, that's whole year 11. So the children who are going to be doing GCSEs next summer, year 13, children who are going to be doing A-levels next summer. And that obviously causes great concern for the parents of those children who are going to be doing those exams, for the children themselves, and for their teachers. So we have to look at everything in the round about how we can cope with this situation. My union, Alex's union, Daisy's union, Kiri's union has today launched the National Education Union. Today we've launched a website, and I think Alex is able to share this website online with you. And this website has been covered today in the Daily Mirror, the Daily Mail. We did a press conference about it. And what this website's showing, so we're showing you a bit of this now, covering the Tower Hamlets area and Morpeth School we're looking at here. You can find this schoolcovidmap.org.uk. And what this does is to take government data and to present it to parents and staff and local councillors. We think it's the most accessible way of presenting the data. So if we're looking at this page now where it says Lawdale Junior School, I don't know Lawdale Junior School, then underneath it, it says concern. That is not concern about Lawdale Junior School. That is the government has put Tower Hamlets, in fact, it's put the whole of London, every London local authority on its watch list as an area of concern. The government is worried that cases are rising in Tower Hamlets. And if you look slightly lower down on that page, the COVID rate around the school, and then it says Tower Hamlets 32, but it's got an arrow next to it showing that the number of cases is going up in Tower Hamlets. And we want people to take from that a message that all of us have to do everything we can to follow all of the government guidance on COVID security in the area, on trying to avoid mixing as much as you can with other families, of trying to avoid contact at the school gate, etc. You know, it's so hard, isn't it? We've all been under lockdown for so long. Then we come back to the school gate, we haven't seen one another since March. And then there's just this tendency, this obvious human tendency to want to get close to one another, to hug one another. And we're saying try and avoid that. But not only does our website talk about that and the need for all of us to do that, we think the government needs to be doing far more. So we have, and Alex is just pointing at it now, an email your MP action. And we would, now I think the MPs we've got on the call, they've already got these messages, but I still think it would do them some, you know, it'd be good if their email is filled up with this. Rushnara and Afsana, they are speaking up for these things already, but we'd still like parents in Tower Hamlets to take this action so that Rushnara and Afsana can say in the House of Commons that they've had emails from members. And what we're asking the government to do is to massively increase the testing that's available in schools. Because what we're finding at the moment is that children have symptoms which might be COVID. They've got a cough. And because they've got a COVID symptom, they have to go home. Now, the majority of children who have to go home in that circumstances will not have COVID. They'll have a cough, they'll have a cold, but they can't get a test which shows that they're negative. So under public health guidance, they can't return to work. And then there are some other children who probably do have COVID, a smaller number, but they've got a cough and they do have COVID, and the school can't act quickly enough to isolate other children who they've been in contact with. And the same thing applies to teachers and support staff. So we've got teachers and support staff who have a temperature or who have a cough, who have to go home, and some of them will not have COVID, but they can't get a test to show that they're negative so they can return to school. Some of them will have the disease, and we're not able to act quickly enough. So we really need the government to ramp up the testing. And let me just say that I don't know how people will feel about this, but the government asked 12 million children and all their staff to do the same thing at the same time, all go back to school on the 2nd of September. So that's 10% of the population of this country, all had to do the same thing, go back to school on the 2nd of September. And when that happens, it's obvious there's going to be a huge need for tests, which then haven't been provided by this government. So we really want that. So we want you to write to your MP and demand that the government does more on testing, but we want the government to do more than that. We want them to reduce class sizes, because what happens when one child has a positive COVID test is that Public Health England quite reasonably says that their whole class has to go home. But the trouble is, in our country, we've got the highest class sizes in Europe, the highest class sizes in primary schools, and nearly the highest class sizes in secondary schools. And that means far more children going home. We want the government to invest in getting class sizes down in our country, which is better for education and means that less children have to go home. We want you to support the idea that the more vulnerable staff can make their contribution working from home. So we're asking parents to support us in saying that staff who are clinically extremely vulnerable, who are older, who have asthma, who have kidney disease, that they can make their contribution. There are lots of children at home, and there is work to do supporting those children at home. So we think we want the more vulnerable staff to be able to make their contribution working at home. And we also want the government, and this isn't happening yet, and I think this is quite astonishing, and it'll be astonishing to parents, the government isn't guaranteeing that all the costs that happen in a school because of COVID are going to be met by the government. So you've got teachers who have to self-isolate, who are sent home by the school because Public Health England say that member of staff, that teacher or that member of support staff has to go home. And then you have to get a supply member of staff to cover for them, obviously. And the government isn't saying that the costs of that, or that the costs of the extra hand washing that schools have to have, they're not guaranteeing that those costs are going to be met. So our website is about drawing to the attention of the whole population that cases are going up. It's meant to encourage people to follow every bit of government guidance, but we also want you to support our demands on government that they do more, that they increase the testing, that they reduce class sizes wherever they can, that they protect vulnerable people, and that they guarantee that all the funding is met, all the necessary funding for the extra costs is met. And one last thing I'll say is we are really worried about the exams next summer. The fact that I'm aware of 3 Year 11 groups in Tower Hamlets that have had to be sent home already on public health advice. Those children in Year 11 coming up to GCSE next year, their parents and their teachers will be really worried about the impact that has on their exams next year. Exams are one way of assessing children. Teacher assessment is another way of assessing children. And we think the government has to look for a plan B. Because if some children have missed out far more on teaching because they've had to be sent home, then they are going to lose the race for exam grades, which we have in our country. And we think teacher assessment in those circumstances could be a better way of giving those children a fair grade. So we hope that you'll support us in saying the government needs a plan B on how we assess children for next year. So I'll stop there, and I'm very willing to take any questions or observe and to listen to what parents have to say. Thank you again for inviting me to the meeting.
Thank you so much, Alex. Sorry, Kevin. I'll just completely agree in terms of exams. I know that some Year 11s have been sent home, and I just don't see how examinations in the summer can be fair after lots of Year 11s being sent home and others not. So yeah, completely agree. I just want to say that Kevin's asked for kind of support from the parents. Kiri has posted in the group chat the links to those websites. So the website for the school COVID map, the website to email your local MP. Kiri has posted those in the chat. So there are links to the COVID map for your local school and also for the letter for the MP. So I'm going to take now Rachel Blake, who's the Deputy Mayor of Tower Hamlets. Rachel, are you there? Hello?
Yep, I'm here, Daisy.
Hi.
Hi.
Okay.
Great. Well, thanks for having me. I just want to start by saying a massive thank you to teachers, to parents, to all the kids that have gone back and all the incredible hard work. I mean, Daisy, you said you're tired after 4 weeks, but I imagine you've been working pretty solidly through the summer as well, getting everything ready. So, and we're teaching before then. And also to the NEU and to Kevin and Alex and the work that you've put in. I think the demands that you're making of government and how we need to move this on are the right ones. And I think actually the position that teachers and parents and children have been put into has been a really difficult position. The testing situation at the start of term, as Kevin rightly pointed out, was completely, anybody could have seen it coming. The needs for every September, kids go back to school, new kids start in reception, they get runny noses, they get those they pick up those bugs that are rightly of concern to all families. And so I think that situation could really have been anticipated. In London, we believe that, I heard last week that 20% of our tests left London to go to other places who needed those tests, and they needed those tests, those places needed them, they needed to understand where the virus was. But London needs tests as well, and we're seeing the testing results that are coming through over the last week or so have shown that London is now in a serious situation, and as your map demonstrates, that's information that the council holds as well, that demonstrates that we are in a serious amber situation ourselves. So I'm really sorry, Danny and I both have to be in a group meeting very quickly, but I did want to firstly share thanks and talk a little bit about what we've been doing as an authority. So the council's been working really closely with head teachers, schools and families in preparation. We did some work with small groups of families, and we still have systems set up to talk to people about any concerns that they have going back to school. Our own public health team works really closely with Public Health England, the Department for Health and Health and Safety colleagues to ensure that single cases are quickly identified to prevent outbreaks. And the local testing capacity is something that we have already. Last week, we wrote to the Secretary of State about the testing situation that we have locally, urging for their testing situation to be resolved so that there is quick and straightforward access. I know myself in that first week that everybody went back, just how many people were getting in touch with me, I need a test, I can't get hold of a test. And I know that lots of teachers will now be familiar with, we have a local outbreak plan, which creates a framework for schools and the Council and Public Health England to all work together. So I think schools have been put under a huge burden, and all of the staff have really risen to that. We're incredibly grateful, and I look forward to hearing more from you. I'm sorry we can't be here for the whole meeting, but I'm really happy to keep in touch with Apsana and Rishnara and to keep the campaigning going around the need for more testing. So thanks again, thank you Daisy, and thanks for organising.
Thank you, Rachel. Yeah, it's so important to keep up the pressure and the campaigning around testing, because at the moment it's just not good enough. So we do need to keep that up. And thank you for explaining some of the work that you've been doing. I'm going to we are going to take some questions in a minute. So if you do have any questions or comments, parents and carers, you can either type them into the chat or feel free to raise your blue hand, because Kevin and Rishnara will be here to answer some of those questions. So I'm going to go to Rishnara Ali, local MP now. Hi, Rishnara. Hi. Yeah.
Hi there.
Hi.
Hi. Well, thank you very much. And I want to start off by thanking you, Daisy, for comparing and chairing this meeting. And also to Kevin for that excellent presentation, and of course the wonderful Alex for constantly bringing us together in these sessions. It's been really good, and I know the last session we had a few months ago, before that, I think it was back in June, was very helpful to us in terms of informing our thinking and what we do in Parliament, and I'm sure it was the same for Danny and others. The Mayor joined as well in that last meeting. So thank you also to all the teachers and everyone else that's been in the school system, helping the schools to keep going through the crisis for key workers, but also subsequently. I know it's been incredibly difficult. Big thanks to the parents in the room, in the call as well. It's been a huge community effort, and it's credit to everybody in our community for all that you've been doing to help young people back into schools. But the anxiety levels are very high. I know in my own family, it's very high before kids were returning to school. And then, of course, we're all constantly anxious about making sure that kids are safe, and of course teachers are safe inside school. So it is a tricky time. And we've got to do everything we can to make sure that kids can carry on, young people can carry on in the education system, but it's got to be done in a safe way. And all the things that Kevin referred to in his comments, those points are well made. Apsana will speak about what she's been doing, but we've both been pushing the arguments about testing along with all our Labour colleagues, as you will be aware. And yesterday, when Gavin Williamson gave a statement, issue again, very much echoing the points Kevin made, because it's just been, I mean, it's in terms of winning the competition for total incompetence. I think Gavin Williamson comes top of the league table of incompetence among cabinet ministers, close equal, if not second, or he might share top place with the Prime Minister and the Health Secretary, but it's utterly appalling. And that statement yesterday, it's as if butter wouldn't melt in his mouth, and you know, nothing, you know, we were all imagining these problems. So the argument about, the point about testing is well made. We'll keep the pressure on. I've raised it with, also in a meeting with Edward Arger, who I met with earlier in the week, in terms of what the local authority needs, what the local agencies need. The other part that is key to all of this is the government is obsessed with commissioning the private sector to do stuff, even though many of them don't have a clue. They would much rather go to Deloitte, who frankly made a dog's breakfast of testing. And, you know, it's not about individuals. It's about the fact that the government's prejudice is in favor of private companies when they should be going to people who are practitioners, the NHS, the local authorities, the trade unions, the teachers, and the list goes on. And so one of the arguments we've made consistently is that testing needs to be a collaborative effort. In fact, it should have been led from the local community and with local agencies. So we are heading in that direction in terms of Tower Hamlets being, along with others, being among the pilots for that to happen. But in my view, it's the wrong way around. It should have been, you know, public health should be localized and should have come from the local community and local agencies. But, you know, better late than never. And there's in terms of testing and tracing, my understanding is that there's a 20% gap in terms of what the Deloitte app can do, but the contact tracing requires local people to do that, and the council is working to try and train up people and using some of the new funds that have been allocated to help do that. But of course, all of these things should have happened months ago. As Rachel has said and others have said, the government knew that kids would be expected to go back to school, and 12 million people going back to school is going to require, should have required planning, and it's not like he didn't know that that's what needed to happen. So in terms of what we do from the Labour front bench, we've got to keep the pressure up on testing. But in terms of London, I'm very much of the view, and I think that's quite well, you know, that is probably a common position that many London MPs, I can't speak for them, but certainly the mayor has echoed those points as well, that we do need to look at keeping families apart, as much as it pains me to say it, because of our circumstances, you know, severe overcrowding, intergenerational living, and so on, which increases risks in certain parts of the city. But my understanding is there's a sort of there's an attempt by the government to have a London-wide response. My concern is that the infection rates are higher in East London, in a number of East London boroughs, as well as, of course, a few in other parts of the city. So there is an issue about when that happens, because as far as I'm concerned, the sooner we get intervention, the more likely we are to avoid a much even harder lockdown, and prevent increases in infection rates and fatalities. But that's a live kind of debate, and I'd be interested to hear your thoughts, particularly those who are working in the front line in the schools and elsewhere, about that point. In terms of other things we've been doing, obviously there are a lot of discussions going on at the moment around contracting. I've been involved with some of that, money being wasted, contracts being awarded to people who don't really know what they're doing. It's frankly, it's, you know, I would say that, you know, that, well, serious questions need to be answered. Some people would say it's a creeping form of quote unquote corruption, or the risk of corruption. It's got to be proven, and there are obviously cases and organisations looking into this. But it's a real worry. It's billions of pounds of money being contracted without proper due diligence of your money, our money. And also, it means that the PPE contracts and so on that needed to be awarded to get the right equipment to the right places weren't happening. And my concern is that this is probably much more widespread, and it does affect all our communities and the different sectors that need the PPE equipment and other things that are required. So there is that going on. There are also issues around what kind of support on the economic front the government provides. We, as you all know, have been keeping the pressure on the government to provide a support program for jobs that are at risk as the furlough scheme comes to an end. Their response has been very, very, very slow. If you think about, you all know this, if you think about how long, employers need in order to prepare, if they can't keep people in work in terms of redundancy and so on, then many of those companies, particularly companies, would have started the process of redundancy consultations. And we made those points clear to the government. If they were to save jobs, then they need to act faster and have targeted and a much more generous scheme than what they've offered. The other thing is, I think it's an absolute scandal that the government's spending £9 billion in the job retention bonus, when actually employers, and some of them have returned the money, which is good, but not all of them will, and they don't actually, many of them don't need it, and it doesn't help people, it doesn't help employers that much to keep people in work. So it's a dead weight loss. It's money that could be spent on schools, on some of the points that Kevin made about class sizes, space, saving lives. So we'll keep making those arguments. But in terms of the economic plan, Tower Hamlets has about 47,000 people who are on the furloughing scheme. We're really concerned about make sure that there's further support that kicks in, and anything you can do to keep the pressure on would be very welcome. Obviously the union movement have been very strong in making those arguments. We need to keep that up on the economic front, because we've got the health crisis, but also the unequal impact on the economic fallout of all of this is being felt already, and it's going to get worse over the next few months. And the final thing I want to say is I love the website. It's fantastic, and please do keep writing to us. It is actually really helpful for us to get up and be able to say in the chamber we've received X thousand letters from parents and teachers, or X hundred. That's really helpful. The one caveat, and I don't know, Afsana may feel similarly, but the one caveat I would say is please bear with us if it takes time to get back to you on those letters, because we've got to prioritize those in most need at this time. During the lockdown period and the height of the crisis, obviously there were much more, many more cases of life and death circumstances. We've got to prioritize those, and you will all understand that. Or parents in difficult circumstances, children with disabilities, and so on. So most MPs will deal with those issues in that way, and kind of.
Okay, to wrap up now, Rashan. Thank you.
So please do keep the letters coming, and thank you for everything you're doing. And I hope to see you again soon when we have the next session, in case we get called away for votes.
Thank you so much. There's been lots and lots of chat in the group, and we are going to come back to this on children with SEND. So lots of comments, lots of conversation. Very, very important that we talk about this, I think, in this meeting. So we are going to come back to those comments. But I am going to go, because I'm aware that Rashnara and Afsana do have to go back to do some votes. So I'm going to take Afsana Begum now, if that's okay. Are you ready to come in, Afsana?
Yes, thank you so much, Daisy, and greetings to everybody that's joined on the call today. I won't repeat too much of what's been said, and I apologize that if the bell does go off, then we will have to leave to go and vote. And unfortunately, I also have another appointment at 7 o'clock, which I'll probably be late for as well. So I just wanted to sort of say that so we can manage expectations. I think just to begin with, there's been sort of widespread concern about the government's approach to schools, in the entire duration of the pandemic. And really early on, I mean, even in May, the Trade Union Congress was saying there should be no increase in people numbers until the full rollout of a national test and trace scheme. And here we are without a full rollout of the national test and trace scheme. And I've reached out to head teachers locally to assure them that they had my full support in ensuring the safety and well-being of pupils comes first. And I still maintain that any used arguments at the time that nothing should happen unless and until scientific evidence and advice indicates that it's safe to move forward with the wider opening of schools, those were really sensible, considered and logical arguments at the time, and they still stand true. But of course, time and time again, parents like yourselves and teachers were largely ignored. We know, of course, that being COVID secure requires proper funding and accountability, and it's the government's inability to do that that's obviously having an impact on children's education and the well-being of staff and students in our wider communities. I've long supported local campaigns to protect our local nurseries, our community language services, really been an advocate of the restoration of Sure Start, ending academisation and abolishing of tuition fees, as well as the restoration of grants and increased funding for adult education. And as some of you will know, I've been working with some of the local special educational needs and disabilities campaigners to highlight that Tower Hamlets schools and early intervention services continue to face significant cuts. And parents of children with additional needs are already struggling to have their children's learning needs met. So, I'm quite concerned actually locally that, we've been told that, sort of further uncertainty looms, and there's even more upheaval locally that's potentially in the not so distant future. And for example, that the Support for Learning service locally in Tower Hamlets is expected to sort of face big budget savings that could result in the service effectively being cut almost in half. I'm also concerned that we are yet to hear as to whether the Tower Reward Scheme and the severance terms, the plans at the centre of the fire and rehire tactics used across the borough earlier this year will also still apply. During this real serious public health crisis, the schools should be concentrating on children's education and COVID safety for children and staff. So I'm also concerned and alarmed to hear more recently about schools such as Cyril Jackson Primary School in my constituency rerunning academy consultations during the pandemic. This is unacceptable. As a Labour politician, as a Labour Party politician, I was proud of the commitment towards opposing schools becoming academies and questioning whether it's proper and ethical to pursue this in really destabilizing and worrying times. And all of this stuff that's been happening during this pandemic in terms of education has really laid bare the problems with fragmentation and marketisation of our school system. So all of these things need to be really examined transparently. And we know that all of these things will have a particular effect on some groups more than others. And the situation for BAME groups and communities will not be made any safer or without careful examination. So I want to sort of highlight, I guess, some of the issues that I'm aware of locally, and some of these sort of alarming things that I'm hearing and I'm really concerned about, because we need to have a really strong local approach and strategy in place to really protect our young people, but also protect our education workers across the board. And that's why I'm pleased that we have the support, and we have an ongoing dialogue with yourselves at the NEU, at Unison locally as well, to really try and pin down these questions and really ask ourselves and politicians across the board as to how we are really going to stand up to this government, and also make sure that locally we are doing our very best for people. I guess I'm sort of sick and tired of looking around and seeing how much hard work that you're all doing, the creativity and the generosity of local people, and the lives that you're living supporting one another is going so unrewarded, because you all know what's best for our children, parents, teachers, local communities, you all know what's best. And so, I'll continue to, my commitment to you is to really stand in solidarity with you all as education workers, as parents, in opposing this government's really risky and reckless disregard. I've been doing a lot of work on the Education Committee, and I think most recently, 2 days ago when I was on the committee, we had a discussion just before about really asking the government and making sure that we all commit to asking the government as to what their plan B is going to be. If the class of 2021 can't sit exams, what is the plan B going to be? And that's going to be a real big focus of the next few weeks as well. So I hope you feel reassured as well. And I'm really sorry that we will be called to votes, but I will definitely follow up with all the comments and questions from parents and education workers, and come back to you on what more I can do.
Thank you so much, Afsana. Really, really good to hear from you. And thank you for coming today to the meeting. I know that you're going to be called to vote soon, but thank you for coming to speak. And we've had some comments. We know that you've done a lot of support with SEND children. There's been lots and lots of comments in the chat. We know that the COVID crisis is going to disproportionately affect children with SEND. So if you're a parent or a carer of any child with SEND, it would be really good to hear any specific worries that you've got regarding support, because the SLS is actually being cut. So we know that that's going to face big cuts, but also we've got this pandemic, which is going to disproportionately affect SEND children. So if there's any parents or carers, if you've got any specific worries regarding support or any questions, please do let us know. We'll take some questions with raised hands in a minute, but I have had a few questions. So for Kevin, Alex, and a few regarding SEND. So one question is, what about SEND children that have found it difficult to go to school before lockdown, and now they find it even harder to go to school as they've fallen more behind? What support are we offering them? And then we've had another question from Dawn. What about staff who feel unsupported in difficult situations in work? Anxiety is showing itself in different ways. But Kiri has put some advice of that into the chat as well. What we'd really like to hear is from any parents and carers. So if you do have any questions for Kevin or Alex or any of our speakers, I think Rishnara is still here and Afsana is still here. You can raise your hand. If you've got any comments, raise your blue hand. I don't know if Kevin can answer that question I had about SEND.
Sorry, Daisy, we are going to have to go.
Oh, okay, no worries.
It's ringing.
Okay,
Apologies.
that's fine. Thank you so much for coming.
Do use the do email us, and also use the new website as well. And thank you so much.
Okay, lovely. Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye. Thank you for coming.
So Daisy, it's really good that Rishnara and Afsana were here. It's good to have MPs who will listen to local constituents' concerns, and I think you should write to them, because MPs need to feel that people are writing and being concerned. I think this question about children with special needs really matters. It mattered before COVID, and it matters all the more in COVID. So a year ago, I was pleased to go and speak to there was a lobby. Some parents were going to the High Court challenging the government about the treatment of children with special needs. And I was pleased to go and speak outside the High Court. And one thing that I think was happening then is there is so much pressure in schools to get league table results in increasingly academic subjects that some schools, not all of them, and not all of them in Tower Hamlets, but some schools start to say, a head teacher will call in a parent and say, this school isn't really the best school for your sort of child who isn't really academic, they should go to another school. And that's not right. We don't support that. All children should be open to all children. All schools should be open to all children. But it's even worse during the COVID period. This is a complicated thing, but one thing is about the way we organise exams in this country. You think you get a grade in an exam because you've reached a certain standard. You know, you get a grade C because you're a certain standard in English language or a certain standard in maths. That's not the way we do exams in this country. Getting a grade C is not about reaching a standard in English. It's about a race with all the other children the way the government chooses to organise exam results in this country is there's a fixed proportion of children who get the grades. So there's a fixed proportion of children who fail every year. And every year, and people don't believe me when they say this, but every year 30% of children fail to get a passing grade in English, the language they speak. And 30% of them fail to get a grade because the government sets it that 30% of children fail every year. So who fails? There's a race to get the grades, and the more work. So let me just say, even if all the children doubled their work and all the teachers trebled their work, you'd still have 30% of children failing, because that's the way the government has set it up. It doesn't matter how much work we do, 30% of children fail. Who gets the passing grades? Who gets the failing grades? It's disadvantaged kids, and it's kids with SEND who get the failing grades every year. And that will be worse in the COVID period, because some children with special needs will find it much more difficult to access online learning. And we've already said that we've had this huge close down period already. So children with SEND have been struggling to get online learning so far. And in Tower Hamlets, and it's typical, 3 Year 11 groups already sent home for a fortnight because of Public Health England say that they have to be at home. And the children with SEND or children in homes where they don't have a laptop or they don't have broadband, or even if they do, there's no room for them to work, those children will be suffering. So it's not right, and we shouldn't have the exam system discriminating against those children, especially this year. So we really have to, that's part of the union's position, is that we need teacher assessment that assesses what children can do. Have you reached a grade C standard? Rather than a race to get the grades with 30% of children failing every year. It's not right to treat children in that way.
Thanks, Kevin. There's been a few questions. I'm not sure of the answers to these, so I don't know if anybody on the meeting do, but about annual reviews. So some parents are very concerned that their children aren't getting the annual reviews that they would be getting, because if they go on lockdown. So we've had, what about, sorry, here we go. Schools now are trying to postpone annual reviews because of COVID. We need reviews more than ever for our children. And Dawn has said, the annual review worries me too. I've spent the last week trying to organise my son's one, but to no avail. And I worry that if we end up looking down soon, his annual review won't get done. So quite a lot of concerns about children with SEND who need their annual review, but they're not going to get done because the schools are going to be closed. I'm not sure, has anybody got any advice on that? Amanda?
Oh yeah, thank you, Daisy. So I am a teacher of the deaf, actually, and I work for the Support for Learning Service in Tower Hamlets. I'm aware about the situation in schools where annual reviews have, in some cases, been delayed for a very long time because of the restrictions on schools and opening. I know that all schools are working very hard now to catch up with those. Some schools have had to hold those meetings to review the planning for children with EHCPs. They've had to hold them online, they've had to hold them on the phone. I've taken part in lots of those meetings during lockdown, and some schools just haven't been able to do that because parents haven't been able to access in that way. I think it is worth pressing, contacting the SENCO of a school and talking to them about what is possible, because even now some schools are finding it difficult to allow parents into the building because of COVID restrictions and risk assessments, etc. So I would urge people to contact their school first of all, and there's also a group called the Parents Advice Centre in Tower Hamlets, which is arm's length from the council and will help parents of children with SEND to access education and their entitlement. But those meetings should hopefully be going ahead soon. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Amanda. We got a question for Kevin. Does the NEU have a plan if the government ignores our latest demands? What's the plan? Are there any more questions? I can't see any more questions in the group. Nobody has their hands up. So Kevin, you right to answer that?
Yeah, I am. We're going to contest the government. We're not the government, but we're contesting the government about what happens to education and children in our country. So to do that, we think we need to build the biggest possible base of support. So we think it matters that we are seen by parents to be on their side. We don't want to be seen as the people who are saying close schools because children need an education. We want children to feel that and this is true, our members, teachers and support staff and school leaders, they want children to be in school. But the government, we think, is really messing it up. They haven't provided the testing that we need. So I think that what we're going to see in some areas, and it won't start in Tower Hamlets. I hope it doesn't start in Tower Hamlets. But in places like Bolton in the northwest, in Newcastle in the northeast, cases are even higher, much higher in fact than they are in Tower Hamlets, and they're going up every week. And it cannot be possible in the end that schools stay open in those areas. And we have to look after our members in schools in those areas, and children go home from school and they might take the virus home, and it's not right to put parents and other people at risk. So the government, we think, will have to close schools in those areas at some point or put them on rota basis. And we think it's really important, I think it's really important that teachers, support staff and parents are united in putting demands on the government that they increase the testing, that they reduce the class sizes, and that's where we're at the moment. And our website is the next stage in that campaign. And let me just say, we were on tenterhooks about launching that website. We were worried that it would be attacked. But today there have been huge numbers of people looking at, huge numbers. The last I heard was 50,000 people in one day looking at that website. It's been run as a story in the Daily Mirror, not as attacking it. The Daily Mail not attacking it. Even, I don't like to say this, but the Sun has run a story about that website, which is driving traffic to that website. So I'd urge you all to promote that website, to ask people to look at it, to ask people to link to email their MP from that website. That is the next stage. It isn't sitting passively waiting for what the government says. It's saying, here is our suggestion about how we run schools better than the way the government is running them at the moment. It's an active thing to do. Please support it.
Thank you, Kevin. Okay, we're going to come to John McLaughlin from Unison next. John, are you there?
Thank you, Kerry. First, I want to say how important this meeting is. It's really important that parents and teaching unions and staff unions organise together, because we have a government that doesn't listen until we make them listen. And if you think back to June, when schools unions were being attacked, when we said, before you look at wider opening of schools, do two things. Firstly, make sure you get the level of community infection down and the rate of spread of infection down. And then when you've got it down, get in place a test, track and trace system that we can open schools safely. And if the government listened properly to us then, we wouldn't be in the position we're in now. But sadly, they haven't. And so we find ourselves not just in schools, but I think the level of anxiety across society, you can feel it rising by the day. And therefore, the things that we're talking about here, the testing, and I do want to say, and it's very disappointing the government, when they've talked about priority testing, they said only priority testing potentially for teachers. Support staff are a really important part of our schools.
Absolutely.
They need the testing as well. And on the testing, there are two elements. There's being able to keep our children at school, because you don't have to self-isolate as many people, but there's keeping our workers and our communities safe. And we live in a borough with very many multi-generational families, many in some of the communities that have been the worst affected by COVID. We have a right to expect that there are measures in place to keep us safe. So that's a correct thing for unions. The last thing about it, the government don't care about support staff because they do not understand education. We are really proud in Tower Hamlets of what we've done over 2 decades in increasing education for the most vulnerable, for kids with special needs, from kids from communities where historically they underperformed, and we've done brilliantly, and we've done it because of the investment. And COVID, it's shown us how much inequality scars society in the rate of death, but scars the life opportunities of people. And COVID ought to be a time where we say that has to stop and be reversed, not the other way round. And all the things we've talked about tonight, the inadequate funding, the problems about testing, the problems about exams, this year showed it full well. If you allow them to, they will reverse the gains that working class kids have made, and they'll make our kids score worse. So this really is important, and we have to keep organised. I think it's a really good initiative tonight. But as Kevin said, the way things are heading, it's not the unions who are doing this, but if the level of community infection isn't kept under control, inevitably it will lead to more and more self-isolations and closure or semi-closure de facto. So we really do need to organise across the board. So it's a really good start tonight, but there's an awful lot of work to be done as well. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak.
Thank you so much, John. Completely agree that support staff as well as teachers should be tested, and we need to keep putting pressure on the government, keep organising. As Kevin said, that website, please do log on to that website, parents and carers, write letters, emails to your MPs. Kiri said in the group chat, even if your MP is Rushnara or Afsana, the volume of mail helps them make cases in government. So it kind of gives it weight behind it if more and more people are emailing with demands and getting those across and putting pressure on the government. If nobody's got any more questions, I'm just going to go to Kevin to see if he's got any kind of final comments and then wrap the meeting up. So we're nice and on time at 7 o'clock. So, Kevin.
Thanks, Daisy. I just want to say thank you again to you and to Alex for the invitation to the meeting, to the parents who are in the meeting and the staff, the school staff who are in the meeting, to John from Unison. There are going to be lots of twists and turns in this crisis, and it's important that we keep the idea of human beings at the front of it. The economy matters, but human beings and human lives matter in all of this, and it's really important that we keep that in the forefront of our minds. We're demanding the best for children in our schools, children with SEND, children of all characteristics. We're also demanding the best for the staff who work in our schools and the parents at the schools. I think the government is letting us down. I mean, it's a difficult situation. It would be difficult for any government, but the government should have had the testing in place. It should have been reducing class sizes because that's leading to far more children being at home. It should be guaranteeing funding to schools. It should be taking measures to get the cases falling. So please do, thank you for being in the meeting. Please do everything you can to support the staff in your schools who are doing their best for the children in their care. And let's make sure we keep the pressure, keep the fire where it needs to be on the government to act in favour of human beings and all of us in this country and getting through, and in the world actually, getting through this crisis together. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you so much for Kevin, for all of your comments and answering the questions. Thank you so much for coming to our meeting tonight. Right, just one last thing before we go. There's been lots of comments and concerns, and I could see in the group chat as well, lots of parents are really worried, especially with if their children has SEND. There is going to be a meeting on the 21st of October, Wednesday the 21st of October. So the NEU is holding an important public meeting, which everyone is welcome to come to. And this will be to oppose the cuts to SEND and SLS in Tower, or SLS SEND in Tower Hamlets. So details will be confirmed, but put the date in your diary, October the 21st, for that SEND meeting. Thank you so much for everyone for coming. This meeting has been recorded and will be put onto our website. So if you know parents and carers who might find some of the information useful but haven't been able to make it today, the meeting has been recorded and will be put on our website. So thank you for coming on your Wednesday evening, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, Daisy. Bye.
Bye. Thank you, Daisy.
Bye.